Okay, succession. If you have bare ground, so this is my neighbour's gravel over there, it tends to get colonised by plants. And the natural climax vegetation, the sort of stable state vegetation that maintains itself in the long run in the UK here, I'm in Dorset, is oak dominated high forest. But to get to that from bare ground, say it's been wiped out by a wildfire, or there's been a prolonged flood which laid a long time, which killed everything, leaving bare mud and bare ground. The succession to the process to get there via other forms of vegetation tends to follow a pattern. That pattern isn't rigid and it may change due to outside circumstances, but basically it's little ephemeral grasses and rushes and things that come in very, very early and form a sward, and then that allows other species which are a little bit taller and ranker to come in, and alongside those trees. You can kind of see that here because we've got lots and lots and lots of these. See little hazel? That's only about a year old. There are a few in here which are 2 years old. And the plan was to take them out and take them up the wood and plant them in my coppice. Why? Because I'm not getting very many hazels in my coppice. Because in the woodland, the grey squirrels, introduced species, and the jays and everything else tend to get 99% of the hazelnuts. Some of the ones they don't get might or might not be fertile. And if a small proportion of those actually survive to germinate and get to this stage, then that means you get very few hazels. And of those that do germinate, if you've got deer, they'll get most of the rest. So getting a new hazel stall coming from seed is a very rare occurrence. In this garden, I've never seen a squirrel. That is unusual. I've never seen a jay, that's not terribly unusual. But basically that's the mother tree over there. You see it by the trailer. And that, in the last 2 years, has produced a lot of nuts. And over here, underneath the trailer, these are 2 years old. That's 1 year old. There's another little one by this big one. These are all destined to go up the wood. I've just got to get the time and the energy to actually do it. This one might even be 3 years old. See him? But somehow, these large nuts, which are about this sort of size, instead of just falling down here, they've got all the way over there. We'll go and look at that again in a minute. Now, I'm not quite sure how that actually happens without any animals to vector them, to actually physically move them. And you get any idea from these cups, which I've just picked up, how big the nuts are. And the idea is that a large seed, such as hazel, can fall into a wood, and then it can grow using the resources in the actual nut, it's half of one, to give itself a head start. Oh, there's an actual nut. And that one's really light, so it's a deader, a duff one. Oak tree has also very large nuts, acorns, and again that is supposed to give it a head start so it can recolonise in a woodland. Most of these species, if the nuts can get outside the woodland, and they tend to just fall, maybe bounce a bit. Let's do that again. So I'm going to drop it now. So he hasn't gone very far at all. Unless it's vectored by, say, a jay, moving it and hiding it in a stash, or a squirrel doing the same and then forgetting about it. The theory is that they don't go very far from the tree. So you'd expect all your hazelnuts to drop here and germinate here. And we've got 8, 10 around here. Might be more in the hedge bottom in amongst all the junk, but we haven't looked in there yet. This tree here is something different. This is a little acer. It's a non-native one because my next door neighbour but one has one in their garden, and that's down on the side from which the prevailing winds blow. And they've got little winged seeds, and they can sort of flutter down and get carried by the wind. Birch trees have got tiny seeds, and they get carried even further. Birch trees make huge amounts of seed, and a very, very few might get carried quite a long way from where the birch is to a nice new open habitat, bare ground or nearly bare ground, where they can germinate and do well away from the mother tree. Birches don't do well under an established tree canopy. Well, hazel, as you can see there, does. So if we look on the other lawn, or we're over here, lots of hazels. 1, 2, 3, 4. I started sticking these in to mark them, but then I started seeing more and more and more. See that one there? Tiny, tiny, tiny. One there, one there, little one there, one there. We've got dozens. So if I mowed this now, they'd all get mown off. They might survive, but then they get mown again in a couple of weeks, and then they won't. And there's lots and lots and lots of them in here. If I left this, I would get a rather nice, very closely spaced hazel coppice, or could have. But in the middle of the suburbs, this is actually quite a large village in Dorset. That's probably not a good plan. My garden's already much less cared for seeming than the neighbours. So what I'm going to do is dig these up and then mow the lawn. Mow the grass anyway. But you can see that that one, which is 2 years old, is all the way over here, and that's 20 metres away from the mother tree. How does it do that? I don't know. So this is a succession almost illustrated. Went from bare ground when the house was built, presumably, to lawn, to grass, and the grass was then maintained. It was frozen. A succession is called a sear, and each vegetation phase in that sear is called a searal stage. And you can freeze a succession from open ground all the way through to oak-dominated high forest at various stages. So this one's been frozen here on this little patch as grassland, which is an early stage in the sear. You can also modify the vegetation in that searal stage by doing things like applying weed and green so that you're favouring the grasses. Or you could graze it with, say, guinea pigs, and whatever you've got. And that would also modify the vegetation. If this wasn't in a suburban garden, you could let this go as it is and turn it into young woodland, which in this case would have a few acers in it, but be dominated by the hazels. And you would doubtless occasionally get an acorn started. So you could then get the road towards oak-dominated high forest in this little patch. That's the Army Ranges just down the road. Nothing desperate. So ecology isn't simple. No mow may isn't the answer to managing a grassland. If grassland is what you have and what you want, the searal stage that you want to arrest your succession at. Say you've got grass, a verge alongside a road, you don't really want tall trees, especially things like acorns, growing right beside the road, dropping wet leaves in the autumn and dropping large acorns. But if you, say, take no mow may and use it as an excuse not to manage the land which you hold in trust for the people who elect you, the council, then I believe using that as an excuse is a perversion of the idea of no mow may and is wrong. So no mow may isn't entirely a good thing. I hope that makes some kind of sense. Let's stop it there with a little zoom towards this little chap. Now the mother tree that all these hazelnuts come from is a wild type hazel, which my mum got me. I'm not sure where that came from. So this thing here is a naturally occurring sport of hazel, and you see it's a copper. This is copper hazel. You get copper beeches and you get copper acers. So this is something you can get thrown up by random chance. The genes in the gene pool of hazels in this particular one have expressed themselves. Might not survive in the wood, but if I took this and planted it in an ancient woodland, is that a good or a bad thing? Let's leave that there. Hope that was interesting and something again to think about. I do like daisies. I think they're very pretty.